The royal summons arrived at dawn, sealed with black wax and bearing the crest of the High Council, 3 wolves circling a broken crown. Elspeth Thornwood knew what it meant before her trembling fingers broke the seal. Ancestral right meant nothing when forbidden lineage stained your blood. The parchment confirmed her darkest fear. She had 3 hours to appear before the Council of Elders, 3 hours before they stripped everything she'd ever known, everything she'd ever been. She pressed her palm against the cold stone wall of her chamber, feeling the ancient magic thrumming beneath the surface. This fortress had belonged to her grandmother, and her grandmother's grandmother before that. 7 generations of Thornwood women had walked these halls, healers and seers who'd served the pack with unwavering devotion. But none of that mattered now. Not when the truth had finally surfaced. The whispers had started 3 moons ago, soft as snow falling on sacred ground. Someone had unearthed the forbidden records, the ones buried deep beneath the council archives. Someone had discovered what her mother died protecting. Elspeth Thornwood was not merely the last of the healer bloodline. She carried the mark of the exiled houses, the descendants of those who'd dared to question Pack's sovereignty when the old wars raged. Her great-great-grandfather had stood against the Alpha Council during the Purge of Crimson Winter, and for that defiance, his entire line had been declared tainted. She dressed in silence, pulling on the simple grey wool dress she'd worn to her mother's funeral. No jewels, no adornments. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her beg for mercy draped in finery. Her dark auburn hair she braided tightly, weaving in the silver ribbons her mother had given her, the only inheritance that remained. In the mirror, her reflection stared back with eyes the color of storm clouds, the same eyes that had marked her family for generations, the same eyes that now condemned her. The walk to the great hall stretched like a nightmare. Every servant she passed averted their gaze. Every guard stood rigid, pretending she'd already become invisible. She'd healed half of them at some point, mended broken bones, soothed fevers, sat vigil through the darkest nights when loved ones hovered between this world and the next. None of it mattered. In the eyes of Pack Law, she was already erased. The great hall doors loomed before her, carved oak reinforced with iron, inscribed with runes of binding and judgment. 2 guards pulled them open without a word, and the sound echoed through the cavernous space like thunder. Inside, the High Council sat in their crescent formation, 12 pairs of eyes watching her approach. At the center, elevated above the rest, sat Alpha Broderick Ravencroft, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his face carved from granite and winter itself. "Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a warm hug." Elspeth forced her spine straight, forced her feet to carry her forward across the polished stone floor. She could feel their judgment pressing against her skin like physical weight. To the Alpha's right sat his son, Thorn Ravencroft, the heir of the realm, the pack's future, the man she'd loved in secret since they were children running through the forest together. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He wouldn't even look at her. That hurt worse than anything else. Worse than the council's cold stares, worse than the ancestral shame, worse than knowing she was about to lose everything. Thorn had promised her once, whispered it against her hair on a summer night when they'd stolen away to the river, that nothing could ever come between them. That promise was dust now. Elspeth Thornwood. Alpha Broderick's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. You stand accused of concealing forbidden lineage, of living among the pack under false pretenses, of violating the sacred council oath that demands truth above all. How do you answer these charges? She could lie. She could claim ignorance, say her mother never told her, throw herself on their mercy. But the Thornwood women had never been liars, even when lies might have saved them. I answer that truth and justice are not always the same, Alpha. Her voice rang clear, stronger than she felt. My lineage is what it is. I cannot change the blood in my veins any more than I can change the moon's path across the sky. But my hands have healed this pack. My knowledge has saved lives. My loyalty has never wavered, not once in 23 years. Loyalty! Counselor Margrave leaned forward. His thin lips twisted in disgust. You speak of loyalty while concealing the very poison that nearly destroyed us. Your great-grandfather was a traitor. He sided with the rogue packs during the Crimson Winter. He would have seen our children slaughtered, our territories burned. That blood runs in you, girl. Tainted blood. Treacherous blood. My great-grandfather questioned whether we had the right to execute prisoners without trial. Elspeth shot back, her control fraying. He asked if mercy might be stronger than vengeance. For that, you call him traitor. For that, you condemn his descendants unto the 7th generation. The silence that followed was suffocating. She'd gone too far. Spoken too boldly. But she was already drowning. What was one more stone around her neck? Alpha Broderick rose slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was ancient by pack standards, nearly 70 winters, but his presence still dominated like a force of nature. When he spoke, each word fell like a hammer blow. The council oath exists for a reason. Trust is the foundation upon which pack sovereignty rests. Without truth, without transparency, we crumble into chaos. You deceived us, Elspeth Thornwood. Whatever your reasons, whatever your justifications, you lied by omission every day you walked among us. My mother. Your mother is dead. His words cut through her protest like a blade. She cannot answer for her choices. But you can. You will. Elspeth's legs trembled, but she locked her knees, refusing to fall. Then pass your judgment, Alpha. I will not beg. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He raised his right hand, and the entire council mirrored the gesture. The ancient symbol of pack law. The signal of unanimous decision. Elspeth Thornwood, by the authority vested in this council by blood and covenant, by the sacred laws passed down through 20 generations, we hereby strip you of your ancestral right. You are removed from the pack registry. Your name will be stricken from the family records. Your claim to Thornwood Hall and all its holdings is forfeit. You have until sunset tomorrow to gather what belongings you can carry and leave our territory. If you are found within our borders after that time, you will be treated as a rogue. Do you understand the terms of your banishment? The word hit her like a physical blow. Banishment. Not just exile from her home, but from the pack itself. From the magical bonds that connected every member to each other. From the ancestral protection that had shielded her bloodline for centuries. They were cutting her off completely, severing her from everything she'd ever known. I understand. Her voice cracked on the second word, betraying her. Then this council's judgment is rendered and binding. Guards, escort her from the hall. 2 guards materialized at her elbows, but Elspeth shook them off. She would walk out of this hall on her own feet, with her head high, even if her heart was shattering into 1,000 pieces. She turned toward the massive doors, forcing herself not to run, not to look back at Thorn even though she could feel his gaze burning into her spine now. She made it 3 steps before his voice rang out. Father, wait. The hall went silent. Everyone turned to stare at the Alpha's heir as he rose from his seat. His hands braced on the table before him. Thorn. The warning in Alpha Broderick's tone could have frozen fire. This matter is settled. Is it? Thorn's dark eyes blazed with something dangerous, something desperate. We're banishing our most skilled healer because of something her ancestor did 70 years ago. That's justice. That's wisdom. That is law, Broderick said coldly. The same law you will uphold when you take my place. Or have you forgotten your duty? Elspeth wanted to scream at him to stop, to sit down, to not throw away everything for her. But her voice had abandoned her. She could only stand frozen as the man she loved committed political suicide before the entire council. I haven't forgotten anything, Thorn said, his voice dropping to something quiet and lethal. Including the fact that Elspeth Thornwood saved my sister's life when fever nearly took her 2 winters ago. That she sat with old Garrick through his final night when no one else would. That she's trained half the young healers we have. What are we without our healers? What are we without mercy? "We are strong," Broderick said. "We are pure. We are not divided by sentiment and foolish compassion. Sit down, my son. You embarrass yourself and dishonor this council." For a long moment Thorn didn't move. His eyes found Elspeth's across the vast hall, and in them she saw anguish and fury and something that might have been love if the world were different. Then slowly he sank back into his chair. It was the moment her heart fully broke. The guards took her arms then, and this time she didn't resist. She let them lead her from the great hall, through the corridors she'd known since childhood, past the healer's wing where she'd studied under her mother's patient guidance, past the gardens where she'd harvested herbs in the early morning mist. Every stone, every tapestry, every familiar turn was a fresh wound. They brought her to her chambers and stationed themselves outside her door. She had until sunset tomorrow. 24 hours to pack a life into whatever she could carry. 24 hours before she became nothing. Elspeth collapsed onto her bed, but the tears wouldn't come. She was too numb, too shattered. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, at the carved wooden beams her grandfather had shaped with his own hands, and wondered how she would survive this. Where would she go? The pack territories stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, and beyond them lay the wildlands where rogues and worse things hunted. A lone woman without pack protection wouldn't last a week. Night fell, and still she lay there, unable to move, unable to think beyond the overwhelming weight of loss. She must have slept eventually, because she woke to the sound of something scraping against her window. Her heart hammered as she crept toward the glass. In the darkness outside, she could make out a figure clinging to the ivy that climbed the tower wall. A figure that swung over the sill the moment she unlatched the window. Thorn landed in a crouch, breathing hard, his dark hair disheveled. He looked at her for one long moment, and then he crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he breathed against her hair. "I'm so sorry, Elspeth." "Tried. Gods, I tried to change his mind, but he won't budge. He says the law is the law, and if he makes an exception for you, every decision he's ever made will be questioned. He says I'll understand when I'm alpha, when the weight of the pack rests on my shoulders. You shouldn't be here." Her voice was muffled against his chest, but she couldn't make herself pull away. Not yet. Not when this might be the last time she ever felt his arms around her. "If they find you, I don't care." His hands cupped her face, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. "Come with me. Right now. We'll leave together, find a new territory. Start fresh somewhere the old laws don't matter." Thorn, no. Her heart was screaming yes, but her mind knew better. "You're the heir. Your pack needs you. Your father needs you. And her voice broke. "I won't let you throw away everything for me. You're not a thing to throw away." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she saw his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "You're everything. Then you'll do what's right." She reached up, covering his hand with hers. "You'll be the alpha this pack needs. You'll change things from within, make them see that the old laws need to evolve. But you can't do that if you run. And I can't stay here knowing I'm the reason you abandoned your people. Elspeth, promise me." She gripped his hand harder. "Promise me you'll stay. Promise me you'll lead them well. Promise me my banishment won't be for nothing." The agony on his face nearly broke her resolve. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "I promise," he whispered. "But I swear to you, Elspeth Thornwood, I will find a way to bring you home. I don't care if it takes years. I don't care what I have to do. This isn't over." He kissed her then, desperate and fierce and tasting of salt tears. Hers or his, she couldn't tell. When he pulled away, she wanted to cling to him, to beg him to stay just a few minutes more. But he was already moving toward the window, already becoming a shadow again. "Survive," he said from the sill. "Whatever it takes, survive. Wait for me." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night like a ghost, and Elspeth was alone again with her grief. The next day passed in a haze. She packed her mother's journals, her herb collection, the silver ribbons, a few changes of clothes. Everything else, the furniture, the tapestries, the lifetime of accumulated belongings, she left behind. Let the pack do with it what they would. None of it mattered anymore. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she stood at the main gates with her single traveling pack, the guards watching her with expressionless faces. A small crowd had gathered, some curious, some sympathetic, most simply there to witness the spectacle of a banishment. She recognized faces in the crowd. People she'd healed. People she'd called friends. None of them spoke. None of them defended her. She was about to turn and walk through the gates when a small figure burst from the crowd. Little Meredith Ashford, barely 8 years old, the baker's daughter. She ran straight to Elspeth and threw her arms around her waist. "Don't go," the child sobbed. "Please don't go. Who will help us when we're sick? Who will know which herbs to use?" Elspeth knelt down, cupping the girl's tear-streaked face. "Your mother knows more than she thinks she does. And the other healers, they'll take care of you. You'll be fine, sweetheart. You're so brave, so strong." "But I want you." Meredith's lower lip trembled. "You made the bad dreams go away. You made everything better. I'm sorry." Elspeth hugged her once more, breathing in the scent of flower and childhood innocence. "I have to go now. But you remember what I taught you, yes? About the chamomile for sleep, and the willow bark for pain. You remember?" Meredith nodded, hiccuping. Her mother appeared then, gently pulling her daughter back, mouthing an apology to Elspeth. The crowd parted to let them through, and then Elspeth was truly alone. She walked through the gates as the sun touched the horizon, walked away from the only home she'd ever known, walked into an uncertain future with nothing but a pack on her back and a heart full of shattered hope. Behind her, she heard the great gates boom shut, heard the bar drop into place. The sound of finality. The forest swallowed her within an hour, the ancient trees closing overhead like a canopy of judgment. Night fell fast in the deep woods, and with it came the sounds, rustling in the undergrowth, distant howls, the snap of branches that might be wind or might be something stalking her. She kept walking, kept putting one foot in front of the other because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant breaking. She didn't know where she was going. Just away. Away from the pack lands, away from the painful memories, away from Thorn's devastated eyes and the council's cold judgment. Her feet followed the old hunting trails by instinct, paths she'd walked 100 times with her mother, gathering herbs and checking trap lines. 3 days she walked, surviving on stream water and the dried meat in her pack, sleeping in hollow trees and rocky overhangs. 3 days of solitude and mounting despair. On the 4th day, she emerged from the forest onto a high ridge and saw it. A village in the valley below, smoke rising from cottage chimneys, fields spreading green and gold in the afternoon light. It wasn't pack territory. She could tell by the absence of boundary markers, by the lack of patrol scents. This was human land, or at least neutral ground where humans and pack members coexisted uneasily. She could stop here, rest, maybe find work as a healer or herb woman, maybe build some semblance of a life. The village was called Millbrook. She learned from the suspicious innkeeper who reluctantly rented her a room. It sat on the border between 3 different pack territories, belonging to none, claimed by none. A place for outcasts and wanderers, for those who didn't quite fit anywhere else. Perfect in its way. She took a room above the tavern, a cramped space with a sagging bed and a window that overlooked the muddy main road. It wasn't Thornwood Hall. It wasn't home. But it was shelter, and for now that would have to be enough. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Elspeth established herself quietly, carefully. She offered her healing services for trade, a poultice for a loaf of bread, a fever remedy for a basket of vegetables. The villagers were wary at first, suspicious of her origins, but results spoke louder than rumors. When she saved the blacksmith's son from blood poisoning, when she helped the midwife deliver a breech baby that should have killed both mother and child, when she nursed old Temperance through winter lung fever, the village began to accept her. Not warmly, not as one of their own, But they stopped crossing the street to avoid her. They nodded when they passed. They brought their sick to her door. It was something. Not enough, but something. The loneliness, though. The loneliness was a constant ache in her chest, a hollow place that nothing could fill. She missed pack bond, the subtle awareness of other pack members, the sense of belonging that had threaded through her entire life until the council severed it. She missed her mother with a fierce, physical pain. She missed Thorn so much it sometimes felt like she was dying. She took to walking the forest at dawn before the village woke, just to feel the wild magic thrumming through the ancient trees. Just to remember what it felt like to be connected to something larger than herself. The forest at least didn't judge her. The forest didn't care about forbidden lineage or council oaths. It was on one of these morning walks, 6 months after her banishment, that she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the peaceful dawn chorus. A child's scream, high and terrified, cutting through the birdsong like a blade. Elspeth ran toward the sound without thinking, her healer instincts overriding caution. She burst through a stand of birch trees and found herself at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood an old stone well, remnant of some long-abandoned homestead. The wooden cover had rotted away, leaving the shaft open and dark and dangerous. And from deep within that darkness came the sobbing, frightened voice of a very young child. "Help! Help somebody! Please help!" Elspeth approached the well carefully, mindful of the crumbling stone lip. She peered over the edge and her heart seized. 10 feet down, maybe more, a little boy clung to the side wall where a few stones jutted out unevenly. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old, his face streaked with tears and dirt, his small body shaking with terror. "Hold on," she called down. "I'm here. I'm going to help you." "What's your name, sweetheart?" "See Cedric," the boy hiccuped. "I fell. Can't get out. It's dark and scary and I want my papa." Cedric. Elspeth's mind raced. She'd heard that name recently, hadn't she? Somewhere in the village gossip, something about a young lord passing through with his son. But she couldn't worry about that now. The child was losing his grip, his small fingers slipping on the damp stone. She quickly assessed her options. The well was too narrow for an adult to climb down safely, and even if she managed it, she might dislodge the boy or get stuck herself. She needed rope. She needed help. "Cedric, listen to me very carefully," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady even as her pulse hammered. "I need you to hold on just a little longer. Can you do that? Can you be very brave for me?" "I'm scared," he whispered. "I know, darling. But you're doing so well. You're being so brave already. I'm going to get rope and pull you up. I'll be very quick. Can you hold on?" "I think so." His voice was so small, so frightened. Elspeth ran. She'd seen a coil of rope in the old homestead ruins nearby, left by shepherds or travelers. Her lungs burned by the time she reached it, grabbed it, sprinted back. The whole time she kept calling down to Cedric, keeping him talking, keeping him conscious and focused. "I'm back," she gasped. "I have the rope. We're going to get you out." She quickly fashioned a makeshift harness, the kind her mother had taught her for rescuing fallen lambs from ravines. Her hands worked from muscle memory, tying knots she'd practiced 100 times. Then she lowered it carefully into the well. "Cedric, there's a loop coming down to you. Can you see it? I need you to put your arms through it like you're putting on a shirt. Can you do that?" She heard scrabbling sounds, then a frustrated sob. "I can't. My arms won't reach. I have to let go of the wall." Elspeth's blood ran cold. If he let go and missed the harness, he'd fall the rest of the way to the bottom. But if he didn't let go, she couldn't save him. His fingers wouldn't hold much longer. "Listen to me, Cedric. You can do this. On the count of 3, you're going to let go with one hand and grab the rope. I'll make sure it's right by your fingers. Ready? 1, 2, 3. She heard his sharp cry of fear, then triumph. "I got it. I got the rope. That's perfect, sweetheart. Now the other hand. I know you're scared, but you can do this. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Another cry, but this one more confident. I got it. I got both. Now pull it over your head and get your arms through the loop. That's it. Good boy. Are you through? Yes. Elspeth braced herself against the well's stone rim and began to pull. The boy weighed nothing, but the rope bit into her hands, drawing blood. She ignored the pain, hauling hand over hand, feeling him rise inch by inch. Her shoulders burned. Her arms trembled. But she couldn't stop. Not until she saw his dark head emerge from the well mouth. Not until she grabbed his collar and pulled him over the edge to safety. He collapsed against her, sobbing, and she held him tight, checking him frantically for injuries. Bruises, scratches, torn clothing, but nothing serious. Nothing broken. He was whole. You're safe, she murmured, rocking him. You're safe now. I've got you. Cedric. The roar that split the morning air was pure anguish and fury combined. Elspeth looked up to see a man burst into the clearing, and her world tilted sideways. He was tall, powerfully built, with jet-black hair and eyes like amber fire. Even in his obvious panic, he moved with a predator's grace, and power radiated from him like heat from a forge. She knew what he was before he spoke another word. Alpha. Not just an alpha. The alpha of somewhere important, somewhere powerful. His eyes locked on the boy in her arms, and relief crashed across his features. He crossed the clearing in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees beside them, running his hands over his son, checking for injuries the same way Elspeth had. Cedric, what happened? Gods, you're bleeding. Did you? His words cut off as his gaze shifted to Elspeth, really seeing her for the first time. She watched recognition flare in those amber eyes, watched them narrow with sudden, dangerous focus. You pulled him from the well. It wasn't a question. He was trapped on a ledge, Elspeth said quietly, reluctantly releasing the boy so his father could take him. I heard him crying. I couldn't leave him. The man gathered his son against his chest, and for a moment, he simply held him. His face pressed into the boy's dark hair. She saw his shoulders shake once, saw him fight for control. When he looked at her again, the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. You saved his life. Anyone would have. No. His voice was firm. Not anyone. You risked your own life climbing over that rotted well lip. You could have fallen in yourself. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. Who are you? Elspeth hesitated. Giving her real name was dangerous. If he knew about her banishment, if word spread that she was living so close to Pact territory, the council might decide she was in violation of the terms. They might send hunters. But lying to an alpha, even a stranger alpha, went against everything her mother had taught her. And besides, she was tired. So tired of hiding, of being afraid, of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Elspeth Thornwood, she said quietly. I live in Millbrook Village. The name clearly meant something to him. His eyes widened fractionally, and she saw knowledge dawn there, saw him put pieces together. The Thornwood healer line. You're the one who was banished from Ravencroft territory 6 months ago. Her stomach dropped. You know about that. Every alpha within 300 miles knows about it. His tone was neutral, carefully so. The Ravencroft Council sent notice to all neighboring pacts. Unauthorized contact with you is considered a breach of pact treaty. She stood abruptly, backing away. Then you should go. Forget you saw me. I won't tell anyone, and you can say you found Cedric yourself. No one needs to know. Stop. His command froze her in place. He rose more slowly, Cedric still clutched in his arms. I said contact with you is considered a breach. I didn't say I agreed with that assessment. Hope and fear warred in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying, he said carefully, that I am Aldrich Stormhaven, Alpha of the Northern Reaches. And I am saying that you saved my son's life. That debt supersedes any treaty. Aldrich Stormhaven. The name resonated through her like a bell. She knew of him, of course. Everyone knew of the Stormhaven Pack. They controlled the northern territories, the wild lands where few others could survive. They were fierce, independent, and they bowed to no one. They'd remained neutral during the old wars, refusing to join either side, and somehow they'd survived where others fell. "I don't want to cause trouble for you," she managed. "You won't." His voice held absolute certainty. "But we need to talk." "Not here. Come back to my camp. It's just beyond the ridge. Let me feed you, let me thank you properly. Then we'll discuss what happens next." "What happens next?" She laughed, and it came out bitter. "Nothing happens next. You go back to your territory. I stay in my village. We forget this ever happened. Is that what you want?" His amber eyes pinned her. "To hide in a human village for the rest of your life. To waste your gifts on the handful of people who don't shun you. To pretend you're not slowly dying from pack bond deprivation." The words hit like physical blows because they were true. All of them. She was dying inside slowly, one lonely day at a time. "What I want doesn't matter," she whispered. "I'm banished. I have nowhere else to go." Aldrich Stormhaven studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Decision crystallized there, sharp and certain. "Come back with me," he said. "To the northern reaches. Join my pack." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "What?" "You heard me. You're a healer, one of the finest if the stories about your family are true. My pack needs a healer. We've been without one for 2 years since old Moira passed. And I—" He looked down at his son, still clinging to him. "I owe you a debt I can never repay. My son's life is worth more than any treaty. The Ravencroft Council can take their treaties and burn them." His voice hardened. "I don't answer to Broderick Ravencroft. I never have. If he wants to challenge my decision, he can come north and discuss it himself." Elspeth's mind raced. It was impossible. It was insane. Pack law explicitly forbade accepting banished members from other packs. It would cause an incident, possibly even war. But the hope blooming in her chest was almost painful in its intensity. "Why?" she breathed. "Why would you risk everything for me?" "Because my son is alive because of you." Aldrich's voice softened. "Because banishing someone for their ancestors' choices is barbaric. Because I've heard about the Thornwood healers, and I know what your family has given to the packs for generations. Because—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Because I lost my mate 3 years ago. I know what it is to be alone. I know what it is to feel like the world has ended. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Tears stung her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. If I come with you, it will complicate your life immensely. Life is already complicated." He shifted Cedric to one hip, freeing his other hand. He extended it to her. "But it's also short. And sometimes you have to do what's right instead of what's easy. Come with me, Elspeth Thornwood. Let me give you back what they took from you. Let me give you a home." She stared at his outstretched hand, at this impossible offer, at this stranger who wanted to save her the way she'd saved his son. It was mad. It was reckless. It would cause so much trouble. But for the first time in 6 months, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and she felt the first whisper of pack magic reaching toward her. Not the Ravencroft bond she'd lost, but something new. Something wild and fierce and northern. It called to something deep in her soul, something she'd thought was dead. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." But he smiled, and it transformed his severe face into something almost gentle. "The north is harsh. The winters will test you. My pack is rough around the edges. But they're loyal, and they don't abandon their own. If you join us, you'll be one of us. Fully. Forever." "I understand. Then let's go home." They walked together back toward his camp, Cedric chattering happily now that the trauma was fading, and for the first time since her banishment, Elspeth felt like she could breathe again. The future was uncertain. The Ravencroft Council would be furious. Thorn would hear about this, would think she'd betrayed him, replaced him. But she was so tired of existing in limbo. So tired of living half a life. And maybe, just maybe, this was the second chance she'd stopped believing in. Aldrich's camp appeared through the trees. A handful of sturdy tents, a central fire, and 3 other adults who looked up with curiosity as they approached. Aldrich introduced them quickly. His beta, Garrett, his tracker, Sable, and his cousin, Roland. All of them stared at her with varying degrees of surprise and wariness. "This is Elspeth Thornwood," Aldrich announced. "She saved Cedric's life, and I've offered her sanctuary in our pack. Anyone have a problem with that?" The 3 exchanged glances. Finally, Garrett stepped forward, a grizzled man with silver threaded through his dark beard. "Heard about you. Heard Ravencroft banished you for your bloodline. That true?" Elspeth lifted her chin. "It is. Ravencroft's a fool then." Garrett extended his hand. "Welcome to the Northern Reaches. We don't give a damn about bloodlines. Only what you do with your gifts." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. She shook his hand, then Sable's, then Roland's. Each of them welcomed her without judgment, without suspicion. Just simple acceptance. Aldrich had her sit by the fire while Sable heated stew and Roland tended to Cedric's scrapes. The boy had already bounced back with the resilience of children, chattering about his adventure in the well like it was a grand story rather than a near-death experience. He kept looking at Elspeth with something like awe. "You're very brave," he told her solemnly. "Papa says you saved my life." "You were brave too," Elspeth said softly. "You held on when you were scared. That takes real courage." Cedric beamed at her, then crawled into his father's lap, suddenly exhausted. Aldrich held him close, and the tender way he cradled his son made Elspeth's chest ache. This was what an alpha should be. Strong but compassionate, powerful but loving. As the afternoon wore on, they talked. Aldrich asked about her training, her knowledge of herbs and healing techniques. She found herself opening up, describing her mother's teachings, the generations of wisdom passed down through Thornwood women. He listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, respecting her expertise. "The North has different plants than the Southern territories," he explained. "Different challenges. Winter sickness hits hard up there. We lose elders every year and sometimes children. Having a skilled healer could change that." "I'll do everything I can," Elspeth promised. And she meant it. This man had given her hope when she'd had none. She would repay that debt with every skill she possessed. As evening fell, Garrett approached Aldrich. "We should head back tomorrow at first light. The pack will be wondering where we are." Aldrich nodded, then turned to Elspeth. "Will you need time to gather your things from the village?" "Not much time. I don't have much." The admission stung, but it was true. 6 months of exile hadn't allowed for accumulating possessions. "Then we'll stop by Millbrook in the morning." He studied her carefully. "Are you certain about this, Elspeth? Once you cross into Northern Reaches territory, once you accept the pact bond, there's no going back. The Ravencroft Council will consider it a final severing." She thought of Thorn, of his whispered promise to find a way to bring her home. This would destroy that hope forever. He would see it as betrayal, as her giving up on them. But what choice did she have? Wait indefinitely in lonely exile for a miracle that might never come? Slowly waste away from pact bond deprivation while he tried to change laws that had stood for centuries? "I'm certain," she said, and pushed down the guilt that rose with the words. That night, she slept in a borrowed bedroll by the fire, and for the first time in months, she dreamed of something other than loss. She dreamed of snow-covered peaks and northern lights dancing across a midnight sky. She dreamed of healing hands and grateful faces. She dreamed of belonging. Morning came crisp and cold. They broke camp efficiently, and Aldrich hoisted Cedric onto his shoulders for the walk to Millbrook. The boy chattered happily, pointing out birds and squirrels, his near-death experience already fading into memory. Children were resilient that way. They healed faster than adults, both in body and spirit. The village appeared through the morning mist, smoke rising from breakfast fires. Elspeth led them to the tavern, acutely aware of the curious stares they attracted. Aldrich's Stormhaven radiated power even when he was trying to be unobtrusive, and the villagers could sense it. They gave the group a wide berth. She packed quickly, her mother's journals, her few possessions, the silver ribbons. Everything fit in her traveling pack with room to spare. She left coins on the bed for the innkeeper, more than she owed for the months of rent, and walked out without looking back. The tavern keeper, old Edmund, caught her on the stairs. "You're leaving then?" "I am." He nodded slowly, his weathered face thoughtful. "You did good work here, girl. Saved my grandson when the fever took him. I won't forget that." "Thank you, Edmund. Where you headed?" She glanced at Aldrich, waiting by the door. "North. I've been offered sanctuary." Understanding dawned in the old man's eyes. "With him? With the Stormhaven pack?" "Yes." Edmund was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his apron and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Take this. It's not much, but it might help. Call it payment for services rendered." Elspeth tried to refuse, but he pressed it into her hands. "Take it. You earned it. And girl, good luck. I hope you find what you're looking for up there." The unexpected kindness threatened to undo her composure. She managed a smile and a nod, then hurried outside before the tears could fall. They left Millbrook behind as the sun climbed higher, heading northeast toward the distant mountains. The journey would take days, Aldrich explained. The northern reaches lay beyond the high passes, in territory most southern wolves avoided. Too cold, too harsh, too wild. But Elspeth didn't mind. With each step away from Ravencroft lands, she felt the weight on her chest lighten slightly. This was forward motion. This was possibility. They traveled steadily, covering ground with the easy pace of experienced wilderness travelers. Garrett and Roland ranged ahead and behind, keeping watch. Sable walked beside Elspeth, asking questions about healing techniques with genuine curiosity. "We've relied on folk remedies and whatever Moira taught us before she passed," Sable explained. "But there's so much we don't know. Last winter we lost 3 elders to lung sickness. Moira said there was nothing to be done, but I always wondered." "There are treatments," Elspeth said carefully. "Not always successful, but they can help. Elecampane root for the lungs, mullein tea to ease breathing, poultices of mustard seed to break up congestion. And isolation, keeping the sick away from the healthy. That's critical." Sable's eyes widened. "We never thought of isolation. We usually have the pack care for the ill together. That's how disease spreads. One sick wolf becomes 10. Elspeth felt herself slipping into teaching mode, something she'd done with her mother's students back in Ravencroft. "I'll show you. I'll teach anyone who wants to learn. Healing knowledge should be shared, not hoarded." "Moira was more possessive of her knowledge," Sable said quietly. "Said some things were only for the healer to know. My mother believed the opposite. She said every wolf should know basic healing, because you never know when the healer might not be available." Elspeth smiled sadly. "She used to say that knowledge dies when we refuse to share it." They walked in companionable silence after that, and Elspeth felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Friendship, maybe. Or the beginning of it. She'd been alone for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone to talk to. That night, they camped in a sheltered valley. Cedric insisted on sitting next to Elspeth during dinner, peppering her with questions about herbs and animals and everything his curious mind could conjure. She answered patiently, amused by his boundless energy. Aldrich watched them with an unreadable expression. Later, after Cedric had finally fallen asleep, he approached her where she sat by the fire. "He likes you," Aldrich said, settling onto a log beside her. "He doesn't warm to people easily. Not since his mother died." He's a wonderful child. You've raised him well. I've tried. Aldrich stared into the flames. It's not easy being both father and alpha. Sometimes I wonder if I'm failing at both. From what I've seen, you're succeeding at both. Elspeth kept her voice low, conscious of the sleeping child nearby. He feels safe with you. Loved. That's what matters. His mother was better at the gentle parts. I'm not gentle. He said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. Gentleness isn't everything. Sometimes children need strength to lean on. Certainty. You give him that. Aldrich turned to look at her, amber eyes reflecting firelight. You're kind to say so. I'm honest. There's a difference. She met his gaze steadily. I don't do flattery, Alpha Stormhaven. I do truth. A slow smile curved his mouth. Aldrich. If you're joining my pack, you call me Aldrich. Aldrich, then. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. Wind through pine trees, the distant call of an owl, the crackle of fire. It felt peaceful in a way Elspeth hadn't experienced in months. Like maybe, possibly, she could build a life here. Can I ask you something? Aldrich's voice was careful. About your banishment. The official notice said you concealed forbidden lineage. But it didn't say whether you'd committed any actual crime. I didn't. Unless you count being born to the wrong grandfather a crime. Bitterness crept into her voice. My great-grandfather questioned the Alpha Council during the Crimson Winter War. He thought executing prisoners without trial was barbaric. He voted against it. For that dissent, his entire bloodline was marked as tainted. 70 years ago. 70 years ago, she confirmed. But in Ravencroft territory, some stains never wash out. Aldrich's jaw tightened. That's not justice. That's vengeance masquerading as law. Tell that to Alpha Broderick. She pulled her knees to her chest. He believes the old laws keep the pack strong. That unity requires absolute loyalty, and questioning the Council's wisdom is the first step toward chaos. The old laws, Aldrich said slowly, were written in a different time. They don't account for the fact that packs need to evolve. That what worked a century ago might not serve us now. Try telling that to the Southern Alphas. They cling to tradition like it's the only thing keeping them alive. Maybe it is. Maybe they're so rigid because they're afraid. Afraid that any change will shatter the carefully maintained order. He shook his head. The North is different. We've always been different. We survive by adapting, not by stubbornly repeating the past. Elspeth studied him in the firelight. Why did you stay neutral during the old wars? The other packs talk about it like it was cowardice. Let them talk. His voice hardened. My grandfather led the pack then. He refused to choose sides because both sides were wrong. The wars weren't about justice or territory. They were about power-hungry alphas using old grudges to justify slaughter. He wouldn't sacrifice northern wolves for southern politics. That must have taken incredible courage. It took pragmatism. And it cost us. We were isolated, sanctioned, threatened. But we survived. And when the wars ended and half the southern packs were decimated, we were still whole. Still strong. He looked at her directly. That's why I don't fear the Ravencroft Council's disapproval, Elspeth. My pack answers to me, not to Broderick Ravencroft's interpretation of ancient law. The confidence in his voice, the absolute certainty, made something in her chest unfurl. This was what leadership looked like. Not the rigid, fearful authoritarianism of the Ravencroft Council, but strength tempered with wisdom. I'm glad Cedric wandered into that clearing, she said softly. Glad I was there. So am I. Aldrich's voice dropped lower. More than you know. They fell silent again, but it was charged now, weighted with things unspoken. Elspeth told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural bond between someone saved and their savior. Nothing more. But when Aldrich finally rose to take first watch, when his hand briefly touched her shoulder in passing, She felt the spark of pack magic between them intensify. Felt it reaching toward her like a living thing, offering connection, offering home. She fell asleep with that warmth wrapped around her consciousness, more content than she'd been in half a year. The next 3 days passed in similar fashion. Long miles of travel, evening camps, conversations that gradually built bridges between strangers becoming packmates. Elspeth learned that Garrett had been with Aldrich since they were children, that Sable had joined the pack after fleeing an abusive mate in the Eastern Territories, that Roland was Aldrich's cousin and had lost his entire family to a rogue attack years ago. They each carried scars, visible and invisible. They each had reasons for choosing the harsh Northern Territories over easier lands. And they each, in their own way, welcomed her without reservation. On the 4th day they reached the high passes. The air grew thin and cold, and Elspeth could see her breath misting in the afternoon sun. Snow clung to the shadowed valleys, and the peaks above were white and sharp against an impossibly blue sky. "Welcome to the northern reaches," Aldrich said, gesturing to the vista spread before them. Elspeth's breath caught. It was beautiful in a fierce, untamed way. The forest here was different. Darker pines twisted by wind, interspersed with bare rock faces and tumbling waterfalls. The land itself felt wild, resistant to softness or civilization. "It's magnificent," she breathed. Aldrich smiled, clearly pleased. "Wait until you see the pack grounds. We've built something good up here, Elspeth. Something worth protecting." They descended into a wide valley as the sun began its decline. Through the trees, she glimpsed structures. Log buildings with steep roofs designed to shed heavy snow, smoke rising from stone chimneys, a central clearing where wolves in human form moved about their evening tasks. As they approached, people began to notice. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. By the time they reached the clearing, a crowd had gathered, curious and wary. A woman stepped forward, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. "You're back. And you've brought a stranger. Morna, meet Elspeth Thornwood," Aldrich said. "She saved Cedric's life 4 days ago. I've offered her sanctuary and the position of pack healer." Morna's eyes narrowed. "Thornwood. That's a southern name. Ravencroft territory, if I'm not mistaken." "You're not mistaken." Elspeth met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I was banished 6 months ago for forbidden lineage. Alpha Stormhaven has offered me a place here, if the pack will have me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She heard her name whispered, heard speculation and doubt. But she also heard curiosity and, in a few voices, tentative welcome. "Forbidden lineage." Morna's tone was skeptical. "What did you do?" "I was born to the wrong grandfather." Elspeth didn't flinch. "My great-grandfather dissented during the Crimson Winter War. For that, his descendants were marked as tainted." "That's southern idiocy," Morna said bluntly. "Punishing children for their ancestors' choices." She turned to Aldrich. "You're certain about this?" "Completely." Morna studied Elspeth for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she stepped forward and clasped Elspeth's wrist in the traditional northern greeting. "Then welcome, Elspeth Thornwood. We've been without a healer too long. Don't make us regret trusting you." "I won't," Elspeth promised. The crowd dispersed slowly, returning to evening tasks. A few people approached to introduce themselves, but most kept their distance. Wary but not hostile. It was more than she'd expected. Aldrich led her to a small cabin on the edge of the clearing. "It's not much," he apologized. "Moira lived here before. We've kept it maintained, hoping to find another healer eventually." Elspeth stepped inside and felt something in her chest expand. It was cozy, a single room with a fireplace, a bed, a work table, shelves that had clearly been built for storing herbs and supplies. Through the window, she could see the forest stretching toward distant peaks. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Get settled. Rest. Tomorrow we'll begin the bonding ritual, if you're still willing." Aldrich lingered in the doorway. "It's not too late to change your mind." "I won't." She turned to face him. "Thank you, Aldrich. For everything. He nodded, something unreadable in his expression, and then he was gone, leaving her alone in her new home. Elspeth unpacked slowly, placing her mother's journals on the shelves, arranging her few possessions with care. When everything was in its place, she sat on the bed and let herself feel it. The overwhelming relief, the cautious hope, the bone-deep exhaustion of the past 6 months finally releasing its grip. She was home. Not the home she'd been born to, but home nonetheless. That night, she slept deeply and dreamlessly, wrapped in warm furs and the faint whisper of northern pack magic reaching toward her, welcoming her, accepting her. The bonding ritual took place at dawn, in the central clearing with the entire pack gathered as witnesses. Morna led the ceremony, her voice strong and clear in the cold morning air. "We gather to welcome a new wolf into our pack," Morna intoned. "Elspeth Thornwood comes to us seeking sanctuary and offering her skills as healer. Does any here object to her inclusion?" Silence. No one spoke against her. Elspeth felt a knot in her chest loosen slightly. "Then by the old rights and the authority vested in this pack, I bind you, Elspeth Thornwood, to the northern reaches. Do you swear to serve this pack with loyalty and honor? To place the pack's well-being above your own? To keep our secrets and defend our territory?" "I swear it." Her voice rang clear. "Do you, Alpha Aldrich Stormhaven, accept this wolf into your pack? Do you vow to protect her as you would any pack member, to grant her the full rights and responsibilities of the northern reaches?" "I do." Aldrich stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Elspeth Thornwood is now pack. Anyone who threatens her threatens us all." The words sent shivers down her spine, not of fear but of belonging. This was it. The moment of transformation. Morna drew a ceremonial knife and made a shallow cut across Elspeth's palm, then did the same to Aldrich. He pressed his bleeding hand to hers, and the pack magic surged between them like lightning. Elspeth gasped as it flooded through her, wild and fierce and utterly unlike the Ravencroft bond. This was storm winds and mountain peaks and winter nights. This was survival against impossible odds. This was pack. The bond settled into her chest like a second heartbeat, connecting her to every wolf present. She could feel them now, their curiosity, their cautious acceptance, their strength. And at the center of it all, she felt Aldrich, solid and unwavering, the anchor that held them all together. "Welcome home, Elspeth Thornwood," Morna said, and the pack echoed the words. Welcome home. The days that followed were a whirlwind of learning and adjustment. The northern wolves had different customs, different traditions. The winters here were brutal, so every decision revolved around survival. Food stores, fuel supplies, shelter maintenance. Everyone contributed, everyone worked. There was no room for laziness or selfishness. Elspeth threw herself into establishing the healer's practice. She inventoried the existing supplies, woefully inadequate, and began making lists of what she needed. The northern forests held different plants than she was used to, so she spent hours wandering with Sable, learning what grew where, when to harvest, how to prepare new remedies. She also began seeing patients. Word spread quickly that the new healer actually knew what she was doing, and soon there was a steady stream of wolves seeking treatment. Minor injuries, chronic pains, questions about children's health. She handled each case with patience and care, building trust one person at a time. Cedric became her shadow, following her everywhere with endless questions. She didn't mind. The boy's curiosity reminded her of herself at that age, soaking up everything her mother taught her. She started teaching him basic things. Which plants were safe, how to clean a wound properly, why washing hands prevented disease. Aldrich watched them together with that same unreadable expression she'd noticed before. He never interfered, never pulled Cedric away, but she felt his attention like a physical weight. 2 weeks after her arrival, a messenger arrived from the south. Elspeth was in her cabin, grinding willow bark, when Garrett knocked on her door. "Alpha wants to see you," he said, his expression grim. "There's news from Ravencroft." Her stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, known that her joining the northern reaches wouldn't go unnoticed. But she'd hoped for more time. She found Aldrich in his hall, a long building that served as both his residence and the pack's gathering space. He stood by the fire, a scroll in his hands, his face carved from stone. "They know," he said without preamble. "Broderick sent a formal complaint. He's demanding I return you to Ravencroft territory to face additional charges." Elspeth's knees went weak. "What charges?" "Violation of banishment terms, unauthorized contact with pack members, theft of proprietary healing knowledge." Aldrich's voice dripped contempt. "It's nonsense, obviously. He's grasping for any excuse to punish you further." "What did you say?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Aldrich looked up, and his amber eyes burned. "I told him to go to hell." The relief that crashed through her was so intense she had to sit down. "Aldrich, you can't. If this escalates, if he brings other alphas into it. Let him try." Aldrich crossed to her, crouching so they were eye level. "Listen to me, Elspeth. You're northern reaches now. You're mine to protect. And I don't give up my wolves because some southern alpha has outdated ideas about justice. But the political ramifications are my problem, not yours." His hand covered hers where it gripped the chair arm. "You focus on healing. Let me worry about politics." She wanted to argue, wanted to protest that she wasn't worth the trouble. But the fierce determination in his eyes silenced her. "There's more," Aldrich said quietly. The message included a personal note. "From Thorn Ravencroft." Her heart stuttered. "What did it say?" Aldrich handed her a folded piece of parchment, separate from the official scroll. She opened it with shaking hands. "Elspeth, if you're reading this, then you've truly chosen the North over any hope of return. I don't understand. I promised I would find a way to bring you home. I've been working on the council, slowly changing minds, building support for a review of your banishment. In another year, maybe two, I could have succeeded. But now you've aligned yourself with a rival alpha, joined a pack that stands opposed to everything Ravencroft represents. My father sees it as the ultimate betrayal, proof that you were never truly loyal. And I don't know what to think anymore. Did our promises mean nothing? Did I mean nothing? Be safe in the frozen north, Elspeth. I hope you find whatever it is you're searching for. But don't expect me to wait for you any longer." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She'd known this would hurt him, but seeing it written out, feeling his pain and confusion and anger through the ink on paper, was devastating. "I'm sorry," Aldrich said softly. "I shouldn't have shown you. No, I needed to see it." She folded the letter carefully, precisely, giving her hands something to do. "He's right. I did betray him. He promised to wait to work for my return, and I gave up. I chose comfort over loyalty. You chose survival over slow death." Aldrich's voice was firm. "There's no shame in that. Isn't there?" She looked up at him, tears streaking her face. "He loved me. I loved him. And I abandoned that because I was impatient, because I couldn't wait a few more years in exile." "Elspeth." Aldrich's hands framed her face, gentle but insistent. "Look at me. Really look at me. You were dying in that village. I could see it the moment I met you. The pack bond deprivation was eating you alive. Another year. You might not have survived another year. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've seen it before. Wolves who lose their pack bond, they fade. They get sick, they lose the will to live, they make stupid mistakes that get them killed. You think Thorn Ravencroft would have thanked you for waiting if you died in some forgotten human village before he could change the council's mind?" She hadn't thought of it that way. Hadn't let herself acknowledge how desperately ill she'd been becoming. "He would have blamed himself," Aldrich continued. "Would have lived with that guilt forever. At least this way he knows you're alive. Cared for. He thinks I betrayed him. Then he's a fool." Aldrich's thumbs brushed away her tears with surprising tenderness. "Any wolf who truly loved you would want you happy and whole, even if it meant you found that happiness elsewhere." The words hung between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Elspeth became suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were, of Aldrich's hand still cradling her face, of the intensity in his amber eyes. She pulled back gently. I should get back to work. I promised Morna I'd look at her arthritis. If Aldrich was disappointed, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and stepped away, letting her retreat to the familiar comfort of healing. But as she left his hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. Something that had nothing to do with pact bonds or political alliances and everything to do with two lonely people recognizing each other's pain. Winter came early to the northern reaches, and with it came the true test of Elspeth's skills. Illness swept through the pack, the dreaded winter lung sickness that Sable had mentioned. At its peak, nearly 20 wolves were bedridden, coughing and feverish and struggling to breathe. Elspeth barely slept for 3 weeks. She moved from patient to patient, administering remedies, monitoring symptoms, adjusting treatments. She set up an isolation area in one of the storage buildings, implementing the quarantine procedures her mother had taught her. She taught the healthy wolves how to protect themselves, how to care for the sick without getting sick themselves. And slowly, painfully, they started to recover. First the younger wolves, then the adults, and finally, miraculously, even the 3 elders who'd been closest to death. When the last patient was declared healthy, Elspeth stumbled back to her cabin and collapsed on her bed, too exhausted to even remove her boots. She woke to find Aldrich sitting in her chair by the fire, watching her sleep. "How long have you been here?" she mumbled, her voice rough from disuse. "Few hours. Wanted to make sure you were actually resting, not trying to work yourself to death." His voice was soft. "You saved them all, Elspeth. Every single one. We haven't had a winter like this without losing anyone in. I can't remember how long. That's what healers do." "Not all healers. Moira was skilled, but she didn't have your gift. Your dedication." He leaned forward. "The pack is grateful. I'm grateful. You don't need to thank me. I'm just doing my job. It's more than a job to you. I've watched you. You care about each patient like their family. Like their pain is your pain." He studied her intently. "You give too much of yourself, Elspeth. You need to learn to hold something back, or you'll burn out. I'll rest when everyone's healthy. Everyone will never all be healthy at the same time. That's not how life works." He stood, crossed to her bed, and pulled a blanket over her. "Sleep. That's an order from your alpha." She should have protested. Should have insisted she had things to do, supplies to restock, follow-up visits to make. But her body betrayed her, already pulling her back toward unconsciousness. The last thing she felt before sleep took her was Aldrich's hand brushing hair back from her face, gentle as a whisper. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, revealing the valley in shades of green and gold. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the forest came alive with new growth. Elspeth had been with the northern reaches for 8 months now, and they'd become home in a way she'd never expected. The wolves treated her with respect and affection. They brought her gifts: wildflowers, interesting stones, a beautifully carved herb box that Roland made in his workshop. They included her in celebrations and gatherings, sought her advice on matters beyond healing. She was pack. Fully, completely, irrevocably. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, she'd fallen in love with the alpha. It wasn't sudden. Wasn't dramatic. It was 1,000 small moments. The way Aldrich listened when she spoke, the way he valued her opinions, the way he made her laugh with dry observations about pack politics. It was watching him with Cedric, seeing the fierce love and gentle patience he showed his son. It was the way he protected her from the political fallout of her presence, dealing with angry messages from the south without ever making her feel like a burden. It was the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious and unexpected. She told herself it was impossible. He was alpha, she was his healer. He'd lost his mate only 3 years ago and was clearly still grieving. And she was still tangled up in guilt over Thorn, still questioning her own choices. But the heart didn't listen to logic. One evening in late spring, she returned from a foraging expedition to find Cedric waiting on her cabin steps, practically vibrating with excitement. Elspeth, Elspeth, Papa says you have to come to the hall right away. There's a surprise. A surprise. She smiled at his enthusiasm. What kind of surprise? I can't tell. That would ruin it. Come on. He grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the Alpha's hall. Inside, she found the entire pack gathered, and they erupted in cheers when she entered. Confused, she looked to Aldrich, who stood by the fire with a rare broad smile. What's going on? It's been 1 year since you saved Cedric's life, Aldrich announced. And 8 months since you joined our pack. We wanted to show our appreciation. Morna stepped forward carrying a beautifully carved wooden chest. From all of us. Open it. Elspeth lifted the lid with shaking hands. Inside lay a healer's kit more comprehensive than anything she'd ever owned. Dozens of glass vials and bottles, surgical tools, bandages, rare dried herbs from across the territories. At the bottom, wrapped in silk, was a silver pendant in the shape of a thornwood flower. It's too much, she whispered, overwhelmed. It's not nearly enough, Garrett said gruffly. You've given us back our health, our hope. This is the least we can do. One by one, pack members came forward to thank her, to share stories of how she'd helped them or their loved ones. By the end, Elspeth was crying openly, unable to contain the emotion flooding through her. When the crowd finally dispersed, leaving food and drink and warm wishes, Aldrich approached her. There's one more thing, he said quietly. He held out a small scroll. This arrived today. She opened it with trembling fingers, recognizing the seal before she even unrolled the parchment. Ravencroft, but not the council seal. Thorn's personal mark. Elspeth, I've spent 8 months angry at you. 8 months feeling betrayed. But I've also spent that time watching my father rule with increasing rigidity, seeing the pack suffer under laws that make no sense. You were right to leave. I see that now. Staying would have killed you slowly but surely. I wish I'd been brave enough to leave with you. To choose love over duty. I wasn't. That's my failure, not yours. I hear you're thriving in the north. That you saved an entire pack from winter sickness. That the Northern Alpha values you the way you deserve to be valued all along. I'm glad. Truly. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say so. Be happy, Elspeth. You've earned it. She read it twice, then a third time, feeling the last chains of guilt fall away. Thorn had released her. Given her permission to move on, to build a new life without the weight of his expectations. He's letting me go, she whispered. Is that what you want? Aldrich's voice was carefully neutral. She looked up at him, this man who'd given her sanctuary when she had nothing, who'd defended her against political pressure, who'd become her friend and maybe, possibly, something more. Yes, she said. That's what I want. Something blazed in his amber eyes. Elspeth. Papa. Papa, look. Cedric's shout cut through whatever Aldrich had been about to say. They both turned to see the boy racing toward them, waving something above his head. A rider. From the south. Elspeth's stomach clenched. Another message from Ravencroft. More threats or demands. But when the rider dismounted in the central clearing, removing his hood, Elspeth's world tilted. She knew that face. Knew those storm-gray eyes. Thorn Ravencroft stood before her, travel-stained and exhausted, and the silence that fell over the gathering was absolute. Elspeth, he said, and his voice cracked on her name. I need to talk to you. Please. The pack murmured uneasily. Aldrich's hand went to the knife at his belt, his entire body going rigid with protective instinct. You're not welcome here, Ravencroft. I'm not here as heir to Ravencroft. Thorn raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. I'm here as a man who needs to speak to the woman he once loved. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Elspeth's heart hammered. She should refuse. Should let Aldrich send him away. But the desperate hope in Thorn's eyes, the reckless courage it must have taken for him to come here alone, to his father's political rival's territory. 5 minutes, she agreed quietly. In my cabin. Elspeth, no. Aldrich's voice was low and dangerous. You don't owe him anything. I owe him closure. We both do. She met his gaze steadily. Trust me. After a long moment, Aldrich stepped back, but his expression promised violence if Thorn stepped out of line. 5 minutes. Then he leaves. Elspeth led Thorn to her cabin in silence, acutely aware of every eye watching them. Inside, she closed the door and turned to face the man she'd once thought she'd spend her life with. You shouldn't have come, she said. I know. He looked around the small space, taking in the herbs hanging to dry, the books on the shelves, the signs of a life rebuilt. But I had to see you. I don't even know. Make sure you were real. That you were truly happy. I am. Happy. As much as I can be after everything. Good. He swallowed hard. That's good. I meant what I wrote. I want you to be happy. But I also needed you to know. I'm leaving Ravencroft. Elspeth's breath caught. What? I can't do it anymore. Can't watch my father destroy lives over ancient grudges. Can't enforce laws I don't believe in. Can't become the alpha he wants me to be. Thorn's hands clenched into fists. Losing you showed me what matters. And power, legacy, tradition. None of it matters if you lose your soul in the process. Thorn, where will you go? What will you do? I don't know yet. Maybe join one of the independent packs. Maybe start my own. Maybe just wander for a while. Figure out who I am outside of being the heir. He looked at her intently. I'm not here to ask you to come with me. I know that ship has sailed. But I needed to tell you. Needed you to know that you changed me. Losing you broke something open inside me. Showed me I'd been living wrong. Oh, thank you. For that, if nothing else. Tears burned her eyes. I'm sorry. For all of it. For not being brave enough to wait. For choosing the easy path. It wasn't easy. And you have nothing to apologize for. Thorn stepped closer, and she saw the boy she'd loved in his face, but also the man he was becoming. You deserved better than what I could give you. Better than waiting in exile while I tried to change centuries of tradition. Stormhaven sees that. I saw the way he looked at you out there. He values you. Protects you. Loves you, even if he hasn't said it yet. He doesn't, she started to protest. He does. Trust me. I know what a man in love looks like. I see it in the mirror every time I think of you. Thorn's smile was sad and genuine. Be happy with him, Elspeth. Let yourself love again. You've earned that. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, gentle and final. Goodbye, Elspeth Thornwood. Thank you for everything you were to me. Then he was gone, slipping out the door and into the gathering dusk. She heard his horse's hoofbeats fade into the distance, and with them went the last ghost of her past. She sat on her bed, feeling strangely empty. Not sad exactly, but hollow, like she'd been holding tension for so long that its absence left a void. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Aldrich entered without waiting for permission, his eyes scanning her face with concern. Are you all right? I think so. She smiled weakly. He came to say goodbye. And to tell me he's leaving Ravencroft. I heard. The entire pack heard. Aldrich closed the door and leaned against it. That took courage. It did. She looked up at him. He also said something else. Something about you. Oh. Aldrich's expression went carefully neutral. He said you love me. The words came out barely above a whisper. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Aldrich didn't deny it. Didn't deflect. He just stood there, letting her see the truth in his eyes. And if I do, he finally said. If I've fallen in love with the healer who saved my son. With the woman who brought life back to my pack. With you. Elspeth's heart hammered so hard she could barely breathe. Then I'd say you're not alone in that. Aldrich crossed the space between them in 3 strides, and then his hands were cupping her face and his lips were on hers and everything else ceased to exist. The kiss was desperate and tender and full of months of unspoken longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I didn't plan this," he whispered. "Didn't expect to fall for you. But you walked into my life and changed everything. Made me remember what it feels like to hope. To want something beyond duty and survival." "I love you," she said, and the words felt like coming home. "I love your strength and your wisdom and the way you love your son. I love the pack you've built, the values you stand for. I love you, Aldrich Stormhaven. Completely. Impossibly. There's nothing impossible about it." He kissed her again, softer this time. "You're mine. My healer. My heart. Mine." "Yours," she agreed, and felt the pack bond between them flare brilliant and binding. They stood wrapped in each other as darkness fell outside, as the pack slowly dispersed to their evening routines, as a new chapter began. Elspeth had been banished, cast out, left to die. But she'd found something better than what she'd lost. She'd found a pack that valued her gifts, a home that welcomed her completely, and a man who loved her not despite her scars but because of them. She'd found everything she'd never known she was searching for. The next morning, Aldrich called the pack together and announced formally what everyone had already guessed, that he and Elspeth were bonding as mates. The cheers were deafening. Cedric launched himself at Elspeth, wrapping his small arms around her waist and declaring that he'd known all along she'd be his new mama. The word sent warmth flooding through her. She would be a mother to this bright, curious, wonderful boy. Would help shape him, teach him, love him as her own. Life settled into a new rhythm. Elspeth continued her healing work, but now with Aldrich by her side. Not just as alpha but as partner and mate. They made decisions together, planned for the pack's future together. Built a life that felt solid and real and deeply, profoundly right. Word spread through the territories about the Northern Alpha who'd defied Ravencroft and taken in a banished healer. Some alphas condemned it. Others quietly approved. A few even reached out, seeking Elspeth's advice on their own outdated laws, wondering if maybe change was possible. The world was shifting, slowly but inevitably. And Elspeth stood at the center of that shift, living proof that the old ways didn't have to define the future. Summer came, warm and golden, and with it came a wedding. Not the grand political affair that would have been required in Ravencroft, but a simple northern ceremony under the stars. The entire pack attended, along with a few surprising guests, including Thorn Ravencroft, who'd settled with an independent pack in the west and come to offer his blessing. He and Elspeth spoke briefly, and there was no pain anymore, just mutual respect and genuine goodwill. He'd found his own path, and she'd found hers. Sometimes that was how love worked. Not forever but for the exact season you needed it. As Elspeth stood beside Aldrich, speaking her vows under a sky full of stars, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The banishment that had destroyed her. The exile that had nearly killed her. The chance encounter with a child in danger that had changed everything. Life was strange and surprising and often cruel. But sometimes if you were brave enough to keep walking even when the path was dark, if you were strong enough to accept help when it was offered, if you were willing to let go of what you'd lost and embrace what you might find, sometimes life surprised you. Sometimes it gave you a second chance. Sometimes it gave you home. Months turned into a year, then two. The northern reaches flourished under Aldrich and Elspeth's joint leadership. The pack grew as other wolves, hearing of their progressive values and strong community, sought to join. Elspeth trained new healers, passing on her mother's knowledge to a new generation. And then, one crisp autumn morning, Elspeth woke with a strange sensation in her belly and the sudden certainty that her life was about to change again. She sought out Morna, who examined her with knowing eyes and a smile. "You're with child, girl. About 2 months along, if I'm not mistaken." The news should have filled her with pure joy. And it did. But it also brought a flutter of fear. She'd always wanted children. But after everything she'd been through, after building this new life from nothing, the thought of bringing new life into the world felt momentous and terrifying. She told Aldrich that evening, in the privacy of their chambers. He stared at her for a long moment, processing. Then his face split into the widest smile she'd ever seen. "A child," he breathed. "We're having a child. Are you happy?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Happy." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "Elspeth, you've given me everything. A second chance at love. Partner who challenges and supports me. And now this. I'm beyond happy. I don't even have words." "I'm scared," she admitted against his chest. "What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not a good mother? What if—" "Hey!" He tilted her face up. "You saved an entire pack from winter sickness. You've healed countless wolves. You've become a mother to Cedric in every way that matters. You've got this. And I'll be with you every step of the way." She believed him. How could she not when he looked at her like she'd hung the stars? The pregnancy progressed smoothly. The pack fussed over her endlessly, bringing her special foods and gifts and unsolicited advice. Cedric was beside himself with excitement at the prospect of a sibling. And Aldrich was so protective it was almost comical, hovering, worrying, trying to forbid her from any strenuous activity until she finally sat him down and reminded him that women had been having babies since the dawn of time and she was perfectly capable of continuing her work. She was 6 months along, her belly round and full when the summons came. A royal summons. But not from Ravencroft. From the High Council of Alphas itself, the ruling body that governed all packs, that met only once every decade to address matters of critical importance. They were calling an emergency session, and both Aldrich and Elspeth were required to attend. "This is about your banishment," Aldrich said grimly, reading the formal document. "Ravencroft has petitioned the High Council to intervene. He's claiming I violated pack law by harboring you, and he wants the council to force me to return you or face sanctions." Elspeth's hand went protectively to her belly. "I won't go back. I can't. You won't." Aldrich's voice was steel. "Over my dead body." But they both knew the High Council's authority was absolute. If the council ruled against them, Aldrich would have to choose between his pack's political standing and keeping Elspeth. And that was a choice she would never ask him to make. The journey south to council territory took 2 weeks. Aldrich insisted on bringing a full escort. Garrett, Roland, Sable, and 10 other wolves. Cedric stayed behind with Morna, much to his disappointment. This was pack politics at its most dangerous, and no place for a child. Elspeth tried to stay calm, tried to have faith that justice would prevail. But as they traveled closer to the massive stone fortress where the council convened, dread built in her chest like a physical weight. The fortress was ancient, built in the time of the first packs, carved from a mountain itself. It loomed against the sky, imposing and cold. Inside, representatives from dozens of packs had gathered. Alphas, heirs, advisors, all dressed in their finest, all watching each other with the wariness of old rivals. And there, standing with a delegation from Ravencroft, was Alpha Broderick. His eyes found Elspeth across the vast hall, and the hatred in them was palpable. Beside him stood someone Elspeth hadn't expected to see, Thorn. But he wore the formal robes of the Ravencroft heir, and his face was carefully blank. Whatever freedom he'd found had apparently been temporary. His father had dragged him back. The council convened at sunset, 12 alphas sitting in judgment. The chief alpha, an ancient woman named Morwenna, called the session to order. "We are here to address a grievance brought by Alpha Broderick Ravencroft against Alpha Aldrich Stormhaven. The charge: violation of pack law through harboring a legally banished wolf. Alpha Ravencroft, present your case." Broderick rose, his voice carrying through the hall. 2 years ago, I banished Elspeth Thornwood from Ravencroft territory for concealing forbidden lineage. This was a lawful banishment, witnessed by my council and recorded in the official registry. Pack law is clear. Banished wolves may not be accepted by other packs. To do so undermines the authority of alpha judgment and creates chaos. Yet Alpha Stormhaven has not only harbored this wolf, he has elevated her to pack healer and bonded her as his mate. This is a direct violation of treaty and precedent. I demand the Council order her return to face additional justice, or levy severe sanctions against the northern reaches. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Elspeth felt Aldrich's hand find hers under the table, squeezing tight. Alpha Stormhaven, Morwenna said. Your response. Aldrich stood, and his presence filled the room. The law Alpha Ravencroft cites is indeed ancient, but it was written in a time when packs warred constantly, when harboring an enemy's banished could be a precursor to attack. We live in different times now. Elspeth Thornwood committed no crime. She was punished for the actions of an ancestor who died 70 years ago. That is not justice. That is vendetta masquerading as law. You dare question my judgment. Broderick's voice rose. I question any judgment that punishes the innocent for another's choices. Aldrich's voice remained steady. Elspeth Thornwood is a master healer. She saved my son's life. She saved my entire pack from winter sickness. She has proven her loyalty and skill 100 times over. I offered her sanctuary because it was the right thing to do. And I would do it again without hesitation. Even if it costs your pack dearly. Morwenna's sharp eyes pinned him. Even if we sanction you, cut off trade routes, declare you in violation of pact treaties. Even then, Aldrich's voice rang with absolute conviction. Some things matter more than politics. The room erupted in arguments, some alphas agreeing, others condemning. Morwenna let it continue for a moment before calling for silence. This council will hear from the wolf in question. Elspeth Thornwood, stand and speak. Elspeth rose on shaking legs, one hand still protective over her pregnant belly. Every eye in the room fixed on her, judging, measuring. I make no excuses for my bloodline, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. I am who I am. My great-grandfather questioned whether executing prisoners without trial was right. For that descent, 7 generations of Thornwoods have been marked as tainted. I grew up serving Ravencroft pack with every skill I possessed. I healed their sick, eased their pain, asked nothing in return. And still, when the truth of my ancestry emerged, I was cast out without mercy. She paused, gathering her courage. You want to know if I regret joining the northern reaches? If I feel I betrayed some sacred trust? You don't. I regret that the world works this way. I regret that ancient grudges matter more than present actions. But I don't regret choosing life over death. And that's what it was. A choice between slowly dying in exile or accepting sanctuary from an alpha who valued my gifts more than my grandfather's mistakes. Silence fell. Then unexpectedly a voice rang out. I speak in defense of Elspeth Thornwood. Everyone turned. Thorn Ravencroft had stood, his face pale but determined. Thorn, sit down, Broderick hissed. No, father. I won't. Thorn moved to the center of the hall. I've been silent too long. Let you make decisions I didn't agree with because I was afraid. Afraid of disappointing you. Afraid of challenging tradition. But not anymore. This is not your place. It is exactly my place. I'm your heir. Your future. And if this is the kind of alpha you want me to become, one who punishes the innocent, who clings to outdated laws, who values pride over compassion, then I want no part of it. Thorn's voice grew stronger. Elspeth Thornwood was the best healer Ravencroft ever had. She was loyal, skilled, and dedicated. We should have celebrated her gifts. Instead, we destroyed her for something she had no control over. That's not strength. That's cruelty. And I'm ashamed I didn't fight harder to stop it. Broderick's face had gone purple with rage. You dare defy me. Here. Before the entire council. I dare tell the truth. Thorn met his father's gaze unflinchingly. And the truth is that Alpha Stormhaven did what we should have done. He gave sanctuary to a skilled healer who needed it. He recognized that bloodline means nothing compared to character. He chose right over easy. If that violates your precious laws, then maybe the laws need to change. The hall erupted again. Alphas shouting, advisors conferring frantically. Morwenna let it continue longer this time, watching the chaos with ancient, knowing eyes. Finally, she raised her hand, and silence fell instantly. "This council will deliberate," she announced. "All parties will retire while we reach a decision." They were ushered to separate waiting chambers, Aldrich's group to one side, Ravencroft's to another. The wait was agonizing. Elspeth paced until Aldrich made her sit, worried about the baby. Time crawled by, each minute an eternity. When they were finally called back to the hall, the tension was suffocating. Morwenna stood, and her face revealed nothing. "This council has reached a decision," she intoned. "But first we require additional testimony. We call Thorn Ravencroft forward." Thorn approached, his expression wary. Morwenna studied him for a long moment. "You spoke passionately in defense of the banished wolf. You defied your alpha and father publicly. These are not small things. Tell this council, if we rule in favor of Ravencroft, if we order Elspeth Thornwood returned, what will you do?" Thorn didn't hesitate. "I'll leave Ravencroft. Permanently. I will not serve a pack that embraces this kind of injustice." Broderick shot to his feet. "You would abandon your birthright. Your duty. For this." Thorn turned to face his father. "Yes, without question. You taught me that strength comes from conviction. Well, this is my conviction. This is my line. And I won't cross it, not even for you." Morwenna nodded slowly. "And if we rule against Ravencroft, if we allow the sanctuary to stand, then I would ask permission to visit the northern reaches occasionally. Not to interfere, but to learn from an alpha who actually understands what leadership means." Aldrich looked shocked. Elspeth felt tears burning her eyes. Thorn was risking everything. His inheritance, his pack, his relationship with his father. All for a principle. All because it was right. Morwenna exchanged glances with the other council members. Then she spoke, and her words would echo through pack history. "Pack law exists to protect us, to provide structure and order in a chaotic world. But law without wisdom is tyranny. Law without compassion is cruelty. This council finds that Alpha Broderick Ravencroft acted within the letter of the law when he banished Elspeth Thornwood. However, we also find that Alpha Aldrich Stormhaven acted within the spirit of pack values, protection, loyalty, and recognition of worth, when he offered sanctuary." She paused, letting that sink in. "Therefore, this council rules as follows. The banishment stands. Elspeth Thornwood remains legally barred from Ravencroft territory. However, Alpha Stormhaven's sanctuary is legitimate and will not be challenged. Furthermore, we recommend that all packs review their banishment laws to ensure they serve justice rather than vengeance. Bloodline alone should never be grounds for banishment. Actions matter. Character matters. This is our ruling." The hall erupted, some in approval, others in outrage. Broderick looked like he'd been struck. Aldrich pulled Elspeth into his arms, relief flooding his face. But Morwenna wasn't finished. "One more thing. Thorn Ravencroft, step forward." Thorn approached, his face showing cautious hope. "You showed great courage today. Courage to stand for principle over politics, to risk everything for truth. That is the mark of a true alpha." Morwenna's voice softened slightly. "When your time comes to lead, whether in Ravencroft or elsewhere, remember this day. Remember that the strongest leaders are those who know when to uphold tradition and when to forge new paths." Thorn bowed deeply. "I will, Council Chief. Thank you." As they filed out of the hall, Elspeth felt like she could finally breathe. It was over. The council had ruled in their favor. She was safe. The baby was safe. Her new life, her new pack, her new love. All of it was protected. Outside, Thorn caught up with them. He and Aldrich studied each other for a long moment, two alphas taking each other's measure. Thank you, Aldrich said finally, extending his hand. That took guts. It should have happened 2 years ago. Thorn shook his hand, then turned to Elspeth. I meant what I said. About visiting, learning from you both. If you'll have me. Of course. Elspeth smiled through tears. You'll always be welcome in the northern reaches. They parted ways then. Thorn returning to face his furious father and uncertain future, Elspeth and Aldrich heading home to their pack, their son, their life. The journey back north felt different. Lighter. Like chains had finally fallen away completely. Elspeth leaned against Aldrich as they rode. His arms secure around her, and felt nothing but peace. What are you thinking? He asked softly. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing. She placed her hand over his where it rested on her belly. I was banished, cast out, left to die. And somehow, through all that pain, I found this. Found you. Found home. No. His lips brushed her temple. We found each other. That's different. 3 months later, on a crisp winter morning with snow falling soft outside, Elspeth gave birth to a daughter. They named her Moira after the old healer, and Elaine after Elspeth's mother. Moira Elaine Stormhaven came into the world squalling and perfect, with her mother's storm-gray eyes and her father's amber-flecked hair. Cedric was beside himself, declaring himself the best big brother in all the territories. The pack celebrated for 3 days straight. Even Thorn sent a gift, a beautifully carved cradle made from thornwood, with a note that simply said, "For new beginnings." And as Elspeth held her daughter, surrounded by her mate and son and pack, she understood something profound. Home wasn't a place you were born to. It wasn't blood or tradition or ancient rites. Home was the people who chose to love you. The place you built with your own hands. The life you created from ashes and hope and stubborn refusal to give up. She'd been banished from a kingdom. But in losing everything, she'd found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found where she belonged.